It wasn't supposed to be anything special, just one night at my aunt's place. That was the plan. I had just finished a long day of driving from my college campus and was on my way to meet up with a friend for a road trip up north. The halfway point, a small suburban town where my mom's older sister, Aunt Claire, lived alone in a quiet house tucked at the edge of a cul-de-sac. She'd offered to let me crash at her place to break up the drive. I hadn't seen her in years, not since some family reunion when I was maybe 13. She was always the cool aunt, a bit mysterious, elegant but distant, someone who used to live in New York and wore nice perfume even when she was just hanging around the house. Now I was 20, and she was, well, I didn't really know how old. Early 40s? Mid? All I knew was that when she opened the door that afternoon, barefoot in jeans and a loose white sweater, she looked nothing like the faded memory I'd had of her. She looked striking. Wow, she smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. Look at you. You've really grown up. I smiled back, suddenly self-conscious. Yeah, it's been a while. She stepped aside to let me in. The house smelled like cinnamon and cedar. It was quiet. No dog barking. No TV buzzing in the background. Peaceful. Make yourself at home, she said, her voice soft, warm. Guest rooms down the hall, bathroom right across. I dropped my duffel bag in the hallway and followed her into the kitchen, where she already had a pot of something simmering on the stove. You didn't have to cook, I said. Nonsense. Your family. And besides, I enjoy it. We ate together at the kitchen island, creamy pasta, garlic bread, red wine for her, water for me. The conversation was light at first. How school was going, what my major was, who I was dating, answer. No one seriously, and how long I'd be gone. But slowly it got deeper. I can't believe your mom let you drive all that way alone, she said, swirling her wine. She used to freak out when I left the driveway after dark. She still kind of does, I admitted, but she's mellowed. Claire laughed, the sound low and slightly hoarse. She hasn't changed a bit. I watched her sip her wine, her eyes lingering on me just a second longer than I expected. Maybe I imagined it. Probably. After dinner, I offered to help clean up, but she waved me off. You're the guest, she said. Besides, I'm weird about my kitchen. I retreated to the guest room. It was cozy. Beige walls, a soft blue quilt, a lamp with one of those dimmer switches that made the whole room feel like it belonged in a magazine. I sat on the edge of the bed for a while, scrolling through my phone, but the signal was weak and the Wi-Fi slower than I was used to. Eventually, I gave up and turned off the lamp, lying back on the bed and listening to the faint creaks of the house settling. I must have dozed off for a bit, maybe an hour. Then I heard it, a light knock at the door. Not loud, not urgent, just quiet, deliberate. I sat up, rubbing my eyes. Yeah. The door creaked open slightly. Claire stood there, backlit by the hallway light. Her hair was down now, and she wore a robe, pale gray, tied loosely at the waist, the soft fabric clinging gently to her form. Sorry, she said in a hushed voice. I didn't mean to wake you. It's okay, I said, my voice a little hoarse. What's up? She hesitated for a moment. Then, I couldn't sleep. I blinked. Oh. She looked over her shoulder briefly, as if checking to make sure no one was around. Though, of course, there was no one else in the house. Would you mind if I came in? Just for a bit? I hesitated, unsure of what to say. Sure. She stepped in slowly, closing the door behind her with a soft click. The room felt smaller instantly. The air, heavier. She sat down in the armchair near the window, pulling the robe tighter around her. I always get restless when it storms, she said. I hadn't noticed before, but outside, rain had begun to tap gently on the glass. Claire looked at me with a half-smile. You were always the calm one, even as a kid. Thought maybe your presence would help. I gave a short laugh, unsure how to respond. I didn't realize I had that effect. She looked down for a moment, then back up at me. You'd be surprised. The rain picked up outside. Inside, everything was still, except for the way my heart had started to beat just a little faster. She wasn't just my aunt anymore. Not in that moment. She was a woman sitting in a dimly lit room, vulnerable, thoughtful, and beautiful in a way I hadn't fully registered until now. And she was here, with me. She sat quietly in the armchair, legs tucked under her robe, one arm draped over the armrest. Her eyes weren't on me at first. She looked out the window, where the rain had grown heavier, the faint glow of streetlights casting blurred reflections on the wet glass. I stayed sitting on the bed, unsure of what to say, unsure of the rules in this moment. It wasn't like we were doing anything wrong. We were just sitting, talking. But the way she'd knocked, the softness in her voice, the way she entered the room like it wasn't the first time, it made the air different, thicker. I never liked storms, she said finally, still gazing out the window. Even when I was younger, thunder especially. I used to pretend I was brave, but the truth is, I hated the feeling of not being in control. I nodded, watching her closely. I get that. I don't mind the sound. But sometimes silence feels worse. She turned to look at me now. You've changed so much. Your voice, your posture, the way you carry yourself. It's strange seeing someone you remember as a boy suddenly look like. She caught herself and smiled faintly. A man. My stomach tightened slightly, but I didn't look away. I guess I grew up, I said with a nervous chuckle. You did, she murmured. And then some. The room fell quiet again. The only sounds were the rhythmic patter of rain and the subtle hum of the house. She reached for the throw blanket folded over the side of the chair and wrapped it around her shoulders. I think I've been lonely lately, more than I realized. Funny how it creeps up on you, doesn't it? I nodded slowly. Yeah, it kind of does. Claire tilted her head and studied me. Do you remember when you were little and you'd always follow me around at family barbecues? I laughed. Vaguely. I think I was just trying to avoid the other kids. She smiled. You'd sit next to me with a paper plate of potato chips and ask me about my job in the city. You always wanted to know what my apartment looked like, what kind of coffee I drank, what I did on Saturdays. You made me feel interesting. You were interesting, I said sincerely. No, she replied, her voice quieter now. I think I just wanted to feel seen. That word, seen. It lingered in the room like a soft echo. She leaned forward slightly, elbows on her knees, hands folded. It's strange. People look at you your whole life. Parents, co-workers, strangers. But being seen, really seen, that's something else. You can go years without it. I swallowed hard. I know what you mean. Her eyes flicked to mine. Do you? I nodded slowly. Sometimes I feel invisible, even around people I care about. Like, they're looking past me, not at me. Claire studied me again, longer this time. Then she stood up, not quickly, not with any suddenness, and walked over to the edge of the bed. She didn't sit, not right away. Just stood there, the soft fabric of her robe brushing her legs, her hands loosely at her sides. Then, carefully, she lowered herself onto the bed, sitting at the far corner, her body angled toward mine. "I don't want you to feel invisible," she said. I held her gaze. "I don't." She reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You remind me of someone. Someone I knew a long time ago." I tilted my head. "Who?" She gave a soft smile. "Someone who made me feel noticed." The rain outside drummed a steady rhythm now, but it was far away compared to the silence between us. Claire shifted slightly closer. "You don't have to say anything. I know this is complicated. I just didn't want the night to pass without letting you know what I see when I look at you." I took a breath. "What do you see?" She hesitated, not because she didn't know, but because the words were heavy. "Real. I see someone strong," she said. "Kind. Curious. Someone who listens. And someone who looks at me like I'm still worth looking at." For a long time, neither of us spoke. She wasn't crying, but there was emotion in her voice that left no doubt. This was coming from somewhere deep, a place I hadn't known existed in her. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, slowly, not pulling away. Her eyes softened. She laid a hand gently on the bedspread between us, not touching me, just close enough that if I moved mine even an inch, they'd meet. But I didn't move, and neither did she. Eventually, she stood again. "I should let you sleep." She crossed the room and paused at the door, her hand resting lightly on the knob. Before she stepped out, she turned slightly over her shoulder and said, "Good night, and thank you for not looking away." Then she closed the door behind her. I didn't sleep much after she left the room. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, the patterns from the window shadows flickering as lightning rolled far off in the distance. My heart still beat unevenly from the intensity of her presence. It wasn't just what she'd said. It was how she said it. Honest, exposed, human. She wasn't just my aunt anymore. Not in the way I had known her as a child. That image was gone, replaced by a woman with layers and cracks, with stories behind her eyes, a longing I hadn't seen until that night. And somehow, I'd been pulled into that quiet space she'd opened. When I finally drifted into sleep, it was restless and shallow. I kept replaying her words in my head. "I see someone who looks at me like I'm still worth looking at." The next morning, sunlight streamed through the half-closed blinds, soft and golden. For a moment, I wasn't sure if it had all actually happened. But then I saw the faint indentation in the bedspread where she'd sat, and I knew. I got up, washed my face, and dressed quickly. When I stepped into the hallway, I could hear faint music playing from the kitchen. A soft jazz tune, the kind that floats through a quiet house like a memory. Claire was standing by the stove, her robe replaced by a simple blouse and loose slacks. Her hair was tied up, and a mug of coffee steamed beside her. When she noticed me, she smiled, a calm, composed smile. Not awkward, not flirty, just kind. "Good morning," she said. "I made coffee." I nodded, suddenly unsure how to act. "Thanks." She poured me a cup without asking and slid it across the island to me. "Sleep okay?" "Yeah." I lied. She didn't push. Instead, we fell into a rhythm that almost felt normal. Breakfast, small talk, dishes clinking gently in the sink. But the undercurrent of the previous night lingered between us, like a faint perfume you catch when someone walks past. She handed me a plate of eggs. "You're leaving today, right?" "Yeah." Hitting the road after breakfast. Claire looked at me then, a little longer than necessary. "That's probably for the best." Her words weren't cold, but they were cautious, guarded, like something had clicked back into place during the night. A line, perhaps, that she was determined not to cross again. I sat down at the table and took a bite, unsure what to say next. Should I bring it up? Ask what last night meant? Or just pretend it hadn't happened at all? She seemed to make the choice for me. I hope I didn't make things uncomfortable, she said gently, buttering a piece of toast. I was tired, a little emotional. Your family, and I let my guard down. I nodded slowly. You don't have to explain. She smiled faintly. Still, I wanted to. I sipped my coffee. I didn't mind, talking. It felt real. Claire looked at me from across the table. It was. But sometimes, being real isn't the same as being right. Those words settled in my chest like a stone. After breakfast, I packed my things and took one last look around the guest room. The blanket was folded neatly, the bed made. Everything looked untouched, as if none of it had happened. But I knew it had. When I carried my bag to the door, Claire was already there, holding it open for me. Drive safe, she said. I will. She hesitated. Text me when you get there. I nodded. I will. And then, for just a second, her hand touched my arm, light but intentional. Take care of yourself, she added. You're someone worth noticing. I met her eyes. So are you. We stood like that for a moment longer. Then I stepped out into the sunlight, the door gently closing behind me. I didn't look back, not because I didn't want to, but because if I did, I wasn't sure I'd leave. The drive back to my place was long and quiet. I had the radio off most of the way. The roads were still slick from the previous night's storm, and the overcast sky made everything feel gray and flat, like the morning after something you can't quite name. I kept thinking about her, the look in her eyes, the warmth of her voice, the moment her hand brushed mine on the bedspread, and then the way she'd pulled back. Not coldly, but carefully. I wasn't confused about what happened. It wasn't about romance, not really. It wasn't even about attraction in the traditional sense. What happened that night, those words exchanged in the dark, were about something more fragile. About being seen in a moment when we both needed it. About connection. And that made it harder, because you don't just walk away from something like that and forget it. By the time I got home and dropped my bag on the floor, the sky had turned darker again. Evening had fallen. The familiar creaks of my apartment felt strangely hollow. I didn't unpack. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, staring at the screen, wondering if I should say something. But what would I say? Thank you? I'm sorry? I'm still thinking about you? I set the phone down. It buzzed 5 minutes later. Claire, did you make it back okay? I stared at it for a second before replying. Me, yeah, just got in. Thanks for everything. Breakfast. And the rest. There was a pause before her next message came through. Claire, I meant what I said. I hope you know that. Me, I do. Another pause. Claire, you're probably wondering what last night was about. Me, I think I understand. And I'm not judging. Her response took longer. Claire, I'm not used to being vulnerable. I've carried a lot of silence over the years. You gave me something I didn't know I needed. Me, you gave me the same. A few minutes passed. I thought that might be the end of it. But then, Claire, sometimes it's not about what's right or wrong. It's about what's real, even if it only lasts a moment. I sat with that for a while, letting it settle in my chest. Then I typed, "Me, if you ever need to talk again, you can knock on my door too." She didn't reply immediately, and she didn't have to, because I knew whatever that night was, whatever it meant, it wasn't just a mistake or an accident. It was a moment two people shared in the middle of a storm, not looking for anything, just not wanting to feel alone. And for a brief, fleeting time, we weren't.